Now let us add something in our test base, that is, I'm going to create some keywords over here. Keywords as in, I'm going to create a method that says public void click, and I'm going to give a locator over here, right? So in this I can give the value as in driver dot find element by dot let's say css selector. Let's say we are working on css, right? By dot css selector, and I can give the selector from or dot get property, right, and the key. So click on the locator, I can give this key over here and then say dot click, right? What will happen is the way I've created a click method, I'm going to create a type method as well. This should accept a locator, and this should also accept a value, right? So what I can do, I can copy this thing from here. So locator, and then I'm gonna say dot send keys, and I'm gonna enter the value over here, right? Now, what will be the benefit of making these keywords? I can go over here in my test. I can say test dot log. This is from the extent report. I'll say log status. So log status dot info. This will I'm going to provide an info, and info will be let's say clicking. Sorry, clicking on, and I'll give locator over here, right? Same thing, I'll copy this thing and paste it over here. And I'll say typing in the locator and entered value as plus value, right? So what will happen if I go to my test cases, the test cases that I've created, it will make my work very easy, right? I'll go over here to my very first test case, that is the bank manager login test. So instead of writing driver dot find element by dot css and all these things and dot click, I can simply say click, right? I can simply call the method click, and in click I can actually pass my locator. So locator as in where we want to click. We want to click let's say on the bank manager login button. So from OR properties I can take that thing, bank manager login button. That's it, right? And then if I go to my second test case, where I was actually doing a lot of stuff over here. So I'll just delete all these things, right? And I'll say click. Click on add customer button, right? And then type on the first name, and the value should be first name, like this, right? Similarly, type over here, type over here, and this should be the value, right? And this should be the value. Same thing goes here. Click on this, right? So see how much code I have reduced. Just say click and give the locator. Just say type, give the locator, and give the value, right? So now if we run this project, let's see what will gonna happen. If I say run as Maven clean, and I'll say run as Maven test, Right, all the steps are executed. And now if I refresh this project and if I open the Surefire reports, the extent report, now we're going to see along with the reports, you're going to have logs. Clicking on Bank Manager Login button, right? This is the info and this is the error. If you go to Add Customer, you'll see the entire steps. Clicking on Add Customer button, typing the first name, entered value as this, typing in last name, enter value as this, typing in postcode, enter value as this, clicking on Add button, right? So you can see how things can be recorded on your report as well. So this is a benefit of using extend report, right? You can manage your logs in a form of your test steps. These are the information. These are your test steps, the steps that you have followed inside your test cases. And if there is any failure, a screenshot will be added accordingly, right? So this is how we can add information to our test, add test steps to our test cases in extend report. You can do more optimization over here, as in right now what we have actually used in our test base, the method that we have created click, it's specific to the css selector. Right now I can try making some changes over here. Let's say I was using css over here, so I can say underscore CSS, right? So when you use XPath, you can say underscore XPath. So you can like you can use any of these things like XPath, CSS. It will make your locators more dynamic. Dynamic in the sense you can use CSS, XPath, and within this click method you can define some logic. Right now we are using CSS, so I'll just write CSS over here. So in same project, we can use CSS, we can use XPath, we can use ID, we can use any locator you want, right? And the locator, you need to write it like this. So how we can dynamically handle locators over here, I can add a condition over here. If locator dot ends with underscore CSS, then it should say driver dot find element by dot CSS, right? Else, if the locator ends with XPath, then the same situation should work for XPath. So you can say driver dot find element by dot XPath, right? The same thing should work with XPath, and same condition will go for ID as well. If it is ID, it should say ID. Right, I can give ID over here. So you can add the other locators accordingly, right? Same thing goes for your type method, right? If the locator ends with CSS, it should perform this. Else, if it ends with XPath, it should actually perform this with XPath, right? Else, if this ends with ID, it should say by.id. So we can make it more dynamic, right? Right now we are using CSS, so it should actually gonna run with CSS. So if I run this thing again, whichever locator you're gonna give, it will gonna work as per that locator. So let's try to change one locator over here. I'll say by XPath, right, for the last name, and I'll say double backslash input at ng model. So I've made the XPath for this instead of CSS. So let's see if it enters the last name and other things correctly or not. So let's run this first. Maven clean. So this is how you can optimize your code, right, so that it supports all locators, not just CSS, right? Let's see. Okay, there seems to be some issues. Okay, let us look. Exact failure. Timeout 5 seconds waiting for when the selector is null. Right, so why it's saying the selector is null. So what happens when we go over here? We need to specify the key as well over here, right? Because the key that we are using over here is bank manager login button underscore CSS, right? So we need to use the same key over here, right? So this we need to be careful about. So we'll say underscore CSS underscore CSS underscore XPath, right? Underscore CSS and underscore CSS. Right. So this we need to follow over here. So if I run this thing now it should actually work. And now we're gonna do run as Maven test. See, it worked. The entire thing worked, right? And if we go back and refresh the extend reports, we're gonna have the steps mentioning clicking on button with the CSS, right? Over here, wherever we have used XPath, it has actually entered the same value, right? So this is how we can be more specific while creating these method like keyword for our locators, right? So we can be more specific whether we want to use CSS, XPath, or ID. And in OR properties, we can define it like this, right?